Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Motivate Podcast Show. I am your host, Rich Wall Street Williams. And on the Motivate Podcast Show, we always say less, but we definitely want to believe for more. I wanted to rebroadcast or represent some information that we did yesterday on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and that was information on the cost of a bad hire. For those that have been following, um, yesterday, Friday, we had the cost of bad hire, and I understand that there were some audio issues that prevented individuals from getting the information that we had presented. So what I decided to do was just jump right in Saturday morning and share the information again. That's going to be posted for you to view later live. Also, if you're interested in the PowerPoint, just shoot me a quick email, direct text, direct message me, um, and I'll make sure that I get the PDF version of the PowerPoint out to you. Some may know, others may not know. I've been doing business development um, since about 2002. I've been in and around sales. I've been helping sales professional, entrepreneurs, small business owners grow their sales. Um, I've traveled from New York to North Carolina doing sales training seminars. And from 2004 till today, I've helped small business owner, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals amass more than $153 million in sales. And part of that journey and process have been business development, in specifically in the area of staffing in the staffing industry. And so I've been focused on staffing development and business development since about 2011, 2012. So this information that I'm sharing with you is not only just information that I've read, but this information is part of conversations that I've had with sales professionals, entrepreneurs, small business owners from New York to North Carolina and other parts of the country as it relates to some of the challenges that they're having um, and identifying and attracting talent. So I'm going to share some information today. Hopefully you find value in it. If you find value in it, again, hit that like, subscribe, but or send me a direct message and or email, and I'll make sure that I'll get the information to you. We can stay connected. So this idea of the cost of a bad hire, right? So what are things that we're going to look at today? And I call this on our journey, and I shared about me, but this just, again, who I am. 12 years staffing industry. I've spent 18, been at least 18 years in real estate business development, business owner. I've had the distinct honor and pleasure of training and coaching, mentoring over 15,000 people since 2004 um, in the area of sales and business development. Um, so where are we going today? We're going to look at what is a bad hire. Bad hire. Let's identify what is a bad hire. We want to identify that. What's the cost of a bad hire based upon current research and what those in the human resource profession have found to be, and staffing associations have found to be the estimated cost of a bad hire, real world examples of a bad hire. How do you prevent a bad hire? And then we'll do a quick wrap up. So, what is a bad hire? A bad hire is an employee who, for one reason or another, does not perform to the expected standards of the role or fit in with the company culture. Bad hires can have negative impacts on productivity, team morale, and even your bottom line, as they may require additional resources to manage or eventually lead to costly turnover. So why do bad hires happen? There are a number of reasons for it. I've just picked out what I believe are the top 4 or 5 reasons that lead to a bad hire. Reason number one is the hiring individual or company rush the hiring process. Listen, friend, you have to trust the process. You have to trust the process, especially if you invested time, energy, and money into developing a process on identifying talent. Rush to hire process. So when companies are in a hurry to fill a position, sometimes they may not take enough time to thoroughly screen candidates and conduct thorough interview. That's part of the coaching and consulting that I do is, what is a thorough screening interview? What does it look like? What are some of the questions? I've discovered in doing this that there is a science side to identifying talent, and then there is a talent side or art side. There's a science side, and then there is an art side to identifying talent. What do you mean? The science side are the personality assessment, the cultural fit assessments. That's the science side. The art side is the dialogue, the conversation, identifying personalities, right? Once you identify the personality through science, then it's the art then of the interview screening process. Does that make sense? So we talk about how do the two work together. How can you invest time up front so that you save thousands and thousands of dollars later? And that's that screening process that I mentioned. Sometimes companies, when they have a bad hires, they lack clear job requirements. If a job requirements are not clearly defined or communicated, it can be difficult to identify the right person for the opportunity, or for the role. So not always the candidate is a bad or not qualified. Sometimes it's the company not clearly identifying what they are looking for. I've had this happen again and again over the years of doing this business development, meeting with a HR professional, VP of HR, CEO, CTO of a company, and hearing what their desire is in the next hire based upon a job description. Then we go out into the marketplace, right? Whether it's a career builder, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, we go out into the job market looking for the person, and we find that the person doesn't exist. Now, the old school term, and let me know you could if you're this will let me know if you're old school or not in staffing and business development. The purple squirrel, right? And so we're looking for a person that doesn't exist. Why does that happen? Because the job description isn't clearly defined. Rich, I want a person that have been on the same job for 10 years. I want a person that has this particular degree in this area of field. I want a person that's salary range is here. I want a person that has these specific technical skills. I want a person, excuse me, that has these specific soft skills, right? And you look at the list and you say, man, this person is perfect on paper, but this person doesn't exist in the real world. So you got to have these conversation. What am I really looking for? Right? When I was selling real estate, I would meet with buyers, and I would say to buyers at the start of the conversation, what does your dream home look like? And they get real excited. We lean into the conversation. Okay, Rich, I want a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home. I want the garage to be detached. I want it to be brick. I want it to be facing east. I want the driveway to be this. And they're naming everything that they want. And they want the level yard, fenced in, no HOA, so they're going on with this list, right? And so typically we generate a list of 10 things. In your dream home, here are 10 things that I want in my dream home, right? And then after we go through the list, I go to the other side of the piece of paper because I draw a line down the middle of the paper. On the left is the dream home. On the right is, okay, so which of these things can you live without? They say. Right. And it's the same way with identifying talent. I know you have a dream list of what that next hire looks like. Um, but be clear on your job requirements. Poor candidate screening. If a company relies solely on resumes or doesn't conduct thorough background checks, they may miss red flags. There's a standard guideline that I particularly look for is 3 and 10, 3 and 10, 3 and 10, 3 and 10. What does 3 and 10 mean? 3 and 10 simply means over the past 10 years, no more than three job assignments, no more than three job duties, right? I'm not talking about contracted workforce. I'm not talking about an individual that was on some type of contract and the contract ended, but they can show a track record of, hey, I've been a subcontractor. I've been on this contract for the federal government, and this contract lasted 2 years, year and a half, 3 years, whatever. Then I went to the, same vehicle, uh, but I'm different contracts. If that makes sense. So we look at the 310 over the past 10 years, no more than three opportunities. As a matter of fact, last week I did a poll on LinkedIn and I asked the question, how many jobs in the past 10 years is too many for you? And I believe the number was somewhere around 81% of the people polled during that 3-day poll said that anything three jobs or more is too much. Now, part of that mixture is you got to look at some things that has happened recently in the country, COVID as an example. Now we're on the other side of the pandemic where it shut the country down, businesses went, businesses closed. There's still some lingering effects of COVID, but for the most part, we've moved to the other side, and the country, most countries are open and traveling. So I'm not talking about that period from I don't know, 2019, 2021, 2020, 2022 period because COVID. Another reason for bad hires is that bias or discrimination. Hiring decisions can be influenced um, um, because of biases that the individual has and or discrimination. So we got to be aware of that, right? Gender, age, race, ethnicity. These biases that we have, and I say we, I believe everyone to some level have a degree of biases that's about them. Okay, so I have a bias or a prejudice against onions. I hate onions. As a matter of fact, I don't like people that like it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, but I'm serious. I don't like onions. So I have a predispensation. I have a posture towards onions that sometimes get in the way of my food selection. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm not talking about I'm talking about a bias to the extent where you will only hire women, or you will only hire men, or you will only hire um, a certain ethnicity group or ethnic group. That's not onions and making a decision to hire only men. See, those are two different things, right? And sometimes we are not aware of our personal biases that gets in the way of our decision making process. We're going to look at the decision making process as it relates to hiring, some tips, techniques that you and I can use that we make better hire decision. And cultural misalignment, when a candidate values and work style don't align with the company's culture, it can lead to poor performance, right? It can lead to poor performance. Here's some real live examples of bad hires. The first example was, there was a marketing agency. They hired a graphic designer who had impressive credentials, a strong portfolio. However, after just a few months on the job, that designer struggled, right? They struggled to meet deadlines, communicate effectively with clients and team members. And so the agency had to spend additional resources to manage the designer's workload and eventually had to let the designer go. And that resulted in a loss of time, money, and productivity. The cost of a bad hire. Another real world example that I came across was a startup company hired a software engineer. And again, the person, impressive credential, resume, seemed like a great fit for the company culture. However, after a few weeks on the job, it became apparent that the engineer lacked the necessary technical skills. Um, Despite training, support, etc., it was still unable. That engineer was still unable to perform to the company's standards, and eventually, they had to release the engineer. Uh, there was an investment, a cost of product development associated with finding um, and hiring a replacement. So this whole idea of the hire, I said earlier, there is a science side, and then there is an art side. And oftentimes there's either a focus on the science side or there's a focus on the art side, right? And so what this whole conversation is about is how do you bring the two sides together so that we have an environment where hiring processes are smoother and we're attracting the right type of talent for our organization. That's where I focus on as it relates to the business um, process. So, what is the cost of a bad hire? So, depending on the research that you read and you follow, so I read the information from with as it relates to HR profession and professionals. Um, um, Staffing associations and other research on human capital, human behavior. The estimated cost for a bad hire, it can vary from 30%. Think about this, from 30% to 150% the cost of a bad hire. So let's assume the cost is 30% and the salary is $65,000 a year. That's $19,500. So it costs that company $19,500 for the bad hire. Listen, if you would only invest in your process, look into your process. Make sure your team is trained on identifying talent. Everyone should be involved in the hiring process, from HR to floor supervisor, everybody, and other employees. One of the things that we've used in the past is I remember I had a client that I was working for, and they opened up a um, call center, and so I was hired to work with the client concerning onboarding process for the call center, and I got real good at it. And I got some additional training, and then eventually I became a subject matter expert on call centers. And so one of the, and I'm putting a tool out there, a strategy, giving you this for free, is we did profile hiring, identifying talent. Now, it sounds a little unearthing, a little unnerving, a little uncomfortable. I'm not sure what word I'm looking for. A little uncomfortable when to say that we profiled workers, but we did. So one of the things that I did was I said, so who are your top performers in your call center? Who are your top performers? And they identified top employees, um, customer service agents that were on their game in terms of their call time and how they accessed the knowledge database when the calls were coming in, and how many calls per hour inbound or how many calls per hour outbound. They were really good at it. And so I sat down with those top performing employees and I began to ask them questions about things that they were doing. What did you do? How are you doing what you're doing on your job? And they would share with me. I would share with them. I would find out things about, where do you shop for your food? What type of articles, magazines do you read? What type of sports do you follow? All of this gave us, and this is part of the art side. The science side is answering the questions. The science side, when you do a personality assessment, It'll give you three or four questions. Are you most likely, least likely, most likely, least likely? Like you're familiar, you know what I'm talking about. That's the science side. The art side is now let's connect with the behavior. Let's talk to the individual. Let's find out tendencies. What time do you typically get to work? Where do you get your coffee? What kind of article? Right. So that gave us a pretty round picture, right? And we over time we were able to increase retention. They were losing people. They were losing like 30% of their 20-30% of the hiring force. I mean 20-30% of the team they were lose every month. Can you imagine if you have 100 people and you're losing 20-30 people a month? Can you imagine the cost, the insaneness, the constant turning over in the HR department? Then when you just look at the process, right? The cost of a bad hire, man, I'm telling you, 30 to up to 150%. But think about that. In that scenario, got a 100-person call center and you got a 20-30% turnover, attrition. You got 20 or 30% people leaving, 20-30%. Average salary is whatever it is. And then the time of the individual, the HR team, et cetera, managers, et cetera, interviewing constantly to go from 20-30% to 10 or 15% is where we end up at. Was really, we literally reduced the cost of the bad hire by almost 50%. Where is that money going now? The money can go into development, the money can go into technology, the money can go to the company bottom line. The company is now a little bit more profitable. But understand that there's a cost. Other factors that are affected by a bad hire is, it impacts the team morale. You got that person that they just don't fit in, or they're struggling, or the whatever the case may be. Company reputation is affected, and decreased productivity, etc. That's the cost of a bad hire. So how do we prevent it? The thorough recruiting process. I just gave you, one of the strategies that I've used in the past. Background checks, reference checks, skill assessments, cultural fit evaluation. What is a cultural fit? If your company is family oriented, some people, some HR professionals will say, yeah, well, we're a team environment, we're a family environment. Team and family means different things to different people. Did you get that? Team and family means different things to different people. Let's pretend that my family experience isn't that great. I have I'm from a dysfunctional family. I'm at the interview and you tell me that working at your company, we all are family. I'm hearing that and I'm filtering that through my experience. We're talking about the behavior side of the interviewing process. You say we are a family. I'm filtering what you're telling me through my experience as a family. Subsequently, on the job, I'm skeptical of my coworkers because I got family members that talk about me behind my back, or I got family members that try to take from me, steal from me. Right. So you got to understand these different dynamics in this hiring process. Onboarding and training program. That's where, for me, I see the biggest part of reducing the cost of a bad hire is onboarding and training programs. Because unfortunately, for the hire, they are being hired using a, oh man, let me say this, an an outdated process. When was the last time you had a conversation with your HR team, your hiring team, your supervisors, your managers, as it relates to new and innovative ways to screen candidates? When was the last time you changed your approach? This is no, this is there. The days where you go out to lunch and you have a great lunch dinner, and you tell stories, jokes, whatever. Now that still does happen on some level, but I'm talking about how do I hire a worker that's a millennial? How do I understand the Generation X, right? How do I hire? My hiring practice, if my hiring practice was developed during the baby boomers, and now I'm interviewing a millennial, Generation X, or Generation Z, the process, the thinking, the exposure is different. So training. One of the things that I focus on is ERT, right? Employee retention training, employee retention training. Sometimes the cost of a bad hire can be reduced by training the people that you have already hired. Does that make sense? I hope it's making sense. So onboarding training, that's something, that I focus in on and we have conversations about. So the wrap up here is this: interrogate your process. It's not always the candidate that's a bad hire. Sometimes it's our process, it's outdated. Ask questions: who, what, when, where, how, and why. You know what I've discovered, friend? I've discovered that answers aren't obligated to come to me if I'm not asking questions. Answers aren't obligated to come to people who don't ask questions. Hey, listen, Bob, I was just curious. Right? Now answers are coming. If I'm not asking myself as a hiring professional, what is preventing my organization from getting to the next level? If I'm not asking myself a question, how do we improve our training programs so that we get maximum results from our employees, from our family? How do I change my perspective? Asking myself a question: is my recruit, select, and hiring process, right? Is my recruiting, selecting, and hiring process, is it based upon a 1950, 1960, or 1970 business model and or population? Is it relevant? Is it relatable? And is it in real time? Is it relevant? Is my process relevant? Is my process relatable? And is my process in real time? Right? And we'll break that down later, but I'm just simply giving some ideas here to look at as it relates to the hiring process. And the final thought here is this, friend: I have to be willing to see the truth about my process. I have to be willing, friend. You have to be willing. You have to be willing to see the truth about your hiring um, process. Maybe a little uncomfortable. That's okay. But when we are uncomfortable, we're growing. Growth and success is based upon our environment. What does our environment look like? Are we offering the best? So listen, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking your time uh, to get this information. Again, if you want this information, you want me to send out the PowerPoint, I'll send out a PDF copy of the PowerPoint. Just drop a comment below, direct message me, email us, and I'll make sure that you get the information that you need. So I'll see you at the top, because the bottom is just too crowded. Now, we never look down on anyone unless we're looking down to give them a hand up. I'll see you soon. Let's get it.